Claire talking. Let's see. So is Jerry out in TV land or here in the room?
I'm in TV land.
All right. So Jerry, Derek, and Claire are in TV land. And Derek and Robert are here. Did I miss anybody?
Yeah. Click it again. Okay, so my question for you, do you want that in your face?
Oh.
Actually, now it's okay because it's dark below. I'm sure. Well, so you have to be at exactly the right height because you got the bar down at the bottom, you don't want that in your eyes, and then you got the thing up the top, you don't want that in your eyes. So, you get rid of the bar to auto high. You make this a bit bigger, but my goal is to not put it in your eyes. Is it in your eyes? Okay, there we go. I'm not sure what the value of seeing a picture of that behind it is.
Well, yeah, no.
So you can see people in TV land.
Yeah, see people in TV land talking.
But
I don't see their images up there anyway. So maybe if they're Claire's there.
Claire's there. And Derek's there. Jerry's logged in.
I'm here.
Jerry, do you want to turn on your camera if you have one?
Good. Let me try.
Yeah, it really would be. But, maybe we're not that surprised by being unable to do it. Okay. All right, and that doesn't seem to be in anyone's eyes, so we're okay.
All right, welcome to the panel of CI, or teams of CI professionals, recruitment, retention, management, team building, and motivation. I'm Aaron Bergstrom. I guess I'll jump in every now and then if need be, but I'll let our panelists introduce themselves. We'll start here locally in the room.
Good morning. My name is Robert Ping. I work for Indiana University Pervasive Technology Institute. I'm in a division called Research Technologies. I'm in a group called Collaboration, Engagement, and Support. So the group Research Technologies has about 100 people, but that includes our supercomputing system administrators. But we also have groups that are specifically who help with performance tuning, who will sit with researchers. And then my group actually makes sure that we connect all of the researchers to the right people in our group with the right tools to get things done. Good.
Hello, I am Dirk Colbury. I formerly worked for the Institute for Cyber-Enabled Research at Michigan State University, where I helped build that program. I was their director of the HPC for a while and was kind of the management of our IT professionals and helped advise our research facilitators. Since then, I've promoted management, but I'm here to talk about some of my experiences.
Would you like to go next?
What was that? We couldn't quite read that.
Just introduce yourselves.
Oh, okay. I'll start. I'm Derek Loddig. I'm at Pennsylvania State University. I work for the Institute for Cyber Science. I am in charge of client engagement for our team. We run
My name is Claire Mizumoto. I'm from the University of California, San Diego. I'm the Director of Research IT Services. It's a fairly new team. We started in formally we started in 2015, and it started out with just me as the facilitator, and we've grown a little bit from then, and I'll be able to talk to you a little bit more about that as we go through the panel question.
All right, Jerry, you want to introduce yourself as well, please?
Yes, I'm Jerry Perez, and I'm Director for Cyber Infrastructure for Research Computing. And I work at UTD.
All right, very good. So I think the focus of this will be, since a lot of us are, a good portion of us are sort of at the beginning of our careers, although I guess I've been at T for 10 years now, it seems like a career. We're going to try to focus on how to grow a center from the ground up. So my first time, in order to grow a single person shop into a multi-person team. Howard, you want to go first?
Sure. So I think at Indiana University, we really concentrated on bringing high performance computing to the forefront in general at the university. And so a lot of things that we've talked about during the training here already are things that helped us so that our team was able to grow. So the more resources we had, the more people we needed to support those resources, the more researchers we had using those resources, the more people we needed to support those researchers. And we made sure we were actually really fortunate that the person who was the vice president of information technology at Indiana University became the president at Indiana University. So information technology is really at the forefront there. I realize not everybody has that luxury. But if you're able to get in front of those people and talk about what it is that you're doing, the importance, and show them the importance by bringing the university in grant dollars or bringing researchers from other universities because you have resources and the people to support those resources, then I think you position yourself in a really good place to grow.
So at Michigan State, we went from a one-person shop, but not a one-person shop, but many one-person shops. So there was a small HPC center in the chemistry building, in the physics building, in the engineering building. And it was actually a grassroots effort by our faculty to combine funds and make the buy-in by the researcher was key. If you build it, they will come is not always true, but if the researchers were wanting to build it, then the central IT hired a very excellent system administrator, and he built our first computers. And then from there, it just got bigger.
Good question before we move on. Since you had multiple shops already, was there pushback from the people actually running those shops on combining into one?
No, everybody thought it was a great idea. No, there was tons of pushback.
I was like, wow.
So this, I mean, the people buying in to the initial clusters were bought in. It was their idea, so of course they were all for it. But there was individual researchers wanted to keep hugging their hardware, and only by the only way we could to make it better was to make a service that was better and cheaper than what they could do individually, and make it feel like they could still hug their software using psychological tricks.
So back when this all started, how many of those small shops were managed by a graduate student who'd come in to work in his discipline and been sacrificed to the sysadmin gods?
Yeah, probably most of them. I would say that's the traditional route for a small HPC or small computing group. You start with a grad student, and they might never get to graduate.
Jerry, so what areas should a small shop focus on in order to grow?
Well, it looks like you all have concentrated on things. But hey, I got a question. It's pretty loud coming through. Well, I guess that just got fixed. Okay, never mind. Let me answer the question. So you all were talking about institutional development, you know, to justifying growth with number of researchers, but there's another dimension. I noticed that the topic of a sysadmin was brought up, that he was excellent. Well, sometimes we don't always have that luxury. Sometimes we have to build our own expertise. And so I have three things to answer this question with. Basically, you need documentation, training, and standard operating procedures. These need to be put in place so that we can address the problem of retention and you know, the the whole point about attrition is that we train people and they take expertise out the door with them. And so I suggest that a strong documentation, training, and operating procedure needs to be established in order to support cyber infrastructure, not just for today and daily operations, but for the future. So we have to future-proof our centers, especially when folks move on to industry or they retire or they leave. It's really hard to compete with academia. So we just have to make sure that we future-proof our centers that way.
Do you find that people are, industry is trying to poach your system admins or other people?
All the time.
And are you able, do they get poached? Are you able to keep them, or what do you do to keep them?
Well, that actually goes into one of the future questions in the panel, but to get to the punchline is people don't quit jobs, they quit bosses. So this is actually a cautionary tale to bosses to develop the employees, or else they're going to develop themselves, and often it'll be in the arms of another organization.
Claire, you have insights on how to grow a small shop?
So unlike my fellow panelists, we don't have roots in the HPC shop on our campus. We're fortunate to have the San Diego Supercomputer Center on our campus. And when they envisioned centralized research computing support, they actually had the vision that the support units would stay where they were living, where they grew up, where they developed, and just having a pointer to them was really, they thought that instead of going through yet another reorg of the campus, that having a pointer to them made sense. And that pointer is the research facilitator, or what has developed into my team. So I have both strict facilitators and I have systems integration engineers. So basically I have researcher facing and I have systems facing folks. But the systems facing folks and the facilitators don't do traditional transactional help desk support kinds of things that I think some of my colleagues kind of grew up out of, where their first foray into this was doing HPC support, user support. So growing the team from my perspective is a little bit different. We spend a lot of time on our goal setting for the year, and we answer to a lot of stakeholders. So for example, the chancellor's very interested in moving all of our students forward to whatever next level they're going to be at, whether it's out in the industry. So we have to kind of pay attention to that. We have both the CIO, we're part of a 10 campus system, the University of California. And so we also have a CIO at that level to which I have to answer. And then there's strictly the faculty. So that's kind of a long story, long description, but to grow my shop, what I had to do is I had to pay attention to all of those stakeholders and kind of grow each of those pieces separately in order to kind of get some buy-in and some support. We very quickly got support from a very high level physicist on our campus, Frank Werthwein, who is executive director of Open Science Grid. And so we are trying to work very closely with him with efforts nationally, as well as local campus efforts.
So when the IT support or research computing support was centralized, but each individual area was left under its own department, do you find that there's competition between those different entities? You're organized under a same umbrella to get resources?
So So there's not a formal organization across the campus that puts those together. And so yes, it is very difficult. You have the traditional sysadmins who've grown up with say a cluster in their, in their particular department or division, who obviously they feel like their job is in jeopardy if we look at all threatening. And so the idea is for us to work together and create partnerships. So we consider the service providers across the campus as partners. And my group essentially doesn't provide a specific service, so that we can be more like, I always tell researchers, we're like Switzerland. We'll be able to assess the potential service solutions and give them a recommendation on what fits their needs and what fits their budget, their time frame. And then service providers are a little bit more interested in having us kind of champion their service as opposed to compete with it.
Derek, can we get some input from you on how to grow a center?
Yeah, so we didn't have anything when we started here, when I first started here at Penn State. One of the two things I think Robert mentioned, that funding obviously is a big thing. We've been very fortunate that the provost here has been very supportive of our efforts in that regards. The second thing is relationship building, obviously. I think he talked also about that snowball. What we've found is that, we did a major transition, and our guys worked with over 200 of our PI groups, which was really good for the PI groups as well as us. It gave us some more insight, and it allowed them to develop those relationships, understand what people were doing to be able to support them better. The biggest thing I think that we've done outside of the relationship building is working with other institutes and departments. We look to partner with them, and we've done a number of joint hires. I said we have 6 staff roughly. Most of those staff are half-time or quarter-time on our side, and they serve other departments such as our Materials Research Institute. So they have connections, and they keep their ear to the ground, so to speak, in those departments. They understand what's going on in there. Then the other part of the time they work for us. So they're feeding that information back into us. And lastly, the biggest thing is ID here, our service center here will work for us part-time while they're working, and yes, a lot of them move on and go to industry. Obviously, they can offer benefits and salary packages better than we can. But those that want to stay within academia and stay within the research community, then they have the ability to transition into our organization as well.
So 2 questions for you. First, the positions that are half-time in your area and half-time in other departments, are they faculty positions, or are they?
No, they're staff positions.
And then for your student training or student employees, do you have a specific training program that you develop?
That's in process, as always. Yeah, we do. We have a manager over our service center, basically, and he basically spends a good bit of time with them when they first start out, going over the types of things, the issues that we see, how they can answer questions, working with faculty. They spend most of their time for the first year plus strictly in the service center. They're not out in the community engaging. Once we feel comfortable that they're successful enough and that they understand enough that's going on, then typically we'll do a transition program where if they're going out to meet with a faculty member or research group, we'll go along with them. We'll do the first engagement. We'll let them do the second engagement and the third engagement. And then once our staff feel comfortable that they're ready to go, they'll release them and say, yeah, okay, you can do your own engagements now.
So not one of the questions I threw out ahead of time, but maybe we can talk a little bit about how the different centers handle student employees. So I don't know, Robert, if you want to speak to how you integrate them in.
We don't have a ton of student employees. We do have some graduate assistantships. We recently had like the Jetstream RU program. And so what I've seen when students are coming in is that they're typically given a mentor within the division. That mentor sits near them, works directly with them. As far as hiring students though, there's a different side of Indiana University, the support center that does hire mostly students, that does support for like the enterprise side, the general applications that people use, email and things like that. But on the research center side, there's not a whole lot of graduate students. Those that do come on board usually come from the support center or some other area of research at Indiana University.
At Michigan State, we've experimented with a lot of student helpers. I've done a few grad students that have both proved wonderful and horrible, depending on what we had them do. I spent a lot of time with undergraduate, we called our ICER interns program, and we would bring students in, mostly not user-facing, so they'd be system-facing and doing projects or installing software, that kind of thing. We had an intake procedure, so we would have them always review the documentation and find three bugs that I mysteriously put in the documentation. They had to go find those bugs and take them out. There never was 3 bugs that I put in. There just always is buggy documentation. And so some students really thrived in that and did a good job. And actually, I always appreciated that. It gave a secondary set of eyes to our documentation. And then depending on the student's interest, we go. But the problem with students is they're transient. So you give them small projects and you hope that they produce. And if they don't, move on.
It's often suggested to me that the solution to all our staffing problems at the university is to employ more students. But it doesn't sound like you guys agree. I mean, they're great if you can find somebody who will apply themselves, but not so great if you have to provide a lot of oversight. Oh, Claire, what are your thoughts on employing students?
So because we're such a new shop, this is actually the first year that we're going to have budget to hire a graduate student. So we're pretty excited about that opportunity. And so I don't have a lot of actual experience with a graduate student, but I know that what we want to do is we want them to be a discipline-specific graduate student so that we can leverage their knowledge and expertise in a particular area, so that they can be kind of a known body. They can speak the same language as the researchers in that particular area. And then we'll use them further as, kind of everybody uses graduate students, and to kind of extend our workforce.
Discipline you're going to.
Sorry, you couldn't hear you at the beginning of that.
Oh, sorry. How did you decide what discipline that the graduate student's going to target?
So we're actually, we haven't actually hired yet. Our budget cycle just started as of July 1st. Area or some area where we see a lot of potential.
Got that additional funding, was that based on the idea that you were going to target non-traditional research computing areas, or is that just what you're?
So, Aaron, you keep cutting out, so I'm not getting all of your question.
Sorry, maybe the cable's not working quite right. When you got the funding, it's part of the funding, request for funding for that grad student? Did you target, like when you asked for the funding, did you target the idea of having a grad student work in a non-traditional high-performance computing area? Or is that just something that you decided you wanted to work on?
So that was my personal goal and my personal vision, but it was not part of the justification. I'm not sure that the folks that were approving it would really have a handle on whether that was a positive or negative. So I think it was more I just being able to reach out to more faculty and more researchers and extend our reach beyond what our existing staff could do.
Very good. Jerry, how do you employ?
Right now, I have one very talented student, and he may not be a student for long if I have my way. I'm trying to convert him over to a part-time employee. And that's one of the strategies that you should do when you see the diamond in the rough. You grab it and you start polishing it and getting it set up for success. He's helped me a lot with the documentation, and he's helping us establish the center with, bug hunts, and he's just, let me see, he told me that he's been using Linux since he was like 12. And so I think we're going to start finding more and more students like this where they're at home with, programming and right out of the box. I mean, even before they come to the university. And I'm fortunate because he's a computer engineering student. So he's at home with hardware and software. And so the temptation is to treat him as a full-blown staff. But I have to remember that he's still just a kid. But he's a very smart one. And so my task is to develop him into a stronger, better individual who could be prepared to take on more responsibility. And I think this is a strategy we have to take with just regular staff as well, because everybody has different skill sets. Everybody has something new to bring to the table. And sometimes we don't have the luxury of hiring folks within a specific discipline. And so this is where the training that I'm talking about can be multidisciplinary. My background in high performance computing actually started at Texas Tech. And so I started off as a system administrator, with a 4-year degree. And after 16 years, ended up with an MBA and PhD in information systems. All of this is because of the vision of Dr. Phil Smith, who was my boss. He always challenged us to learn more beyond our comfort level. And we discovered that as we plateaued, we found a new comfort level. And so there was only one direction but up. And so I took that philosophy with a lot of my students. In fact, one of them right now is the dean of the math department at Wayland Baptist University in Plainview. He never stopped going up. And so I'm very happy to share this reality, and that is we expect more from our students.
So when you say that you expect to find more students like that, are you saying that you will look for students specifically from those skill sets, or do you think more of those?
I think both. The quality of student that's coming around normally have between 2 and 3 programming languages already out of high school. A lot of them come from very structured programs. So I'm very fortunate to have had some very good students in the past. I've also had some students, so at Texas Tech, I wrote a student's manual. And so it helped them understand how to deal with phone calls, how to answer tickets, especially trouble tickets with software, problems, trouble tickets. So we basically built the help desk. And we had a script that they could read from, and we had troubleshooting guides. And so with each new application that was installed on the supercomputer, we were able to identify gotchas, if you will, things that normally plague researchers, especially new ones with a particular application set. And so the students were able to anticipate a lot of these problems by going through the troubleshooting guides that we created. And so in essence, you can pretty much take almost anybody and have them learn how we do high performance computing operations. But it takes a special somebody to take that and own it and run with it. And so students get really good when they no longer need to use the manual, when they know the procedure by heart. They actually start learning the science. They start understanding how applications work and how operations work. And a lot of those people end up becoming high performance computing staff or researchers like myself. I went from assistant admin to research scientist, then to senior research scientist, and then now I'm here at UTD as when we create a path for our students, they will take it and they will follow.
Do you feel that the student guide that you created is really focused on your institution, or is that something that can be used by a lot of institutions?
I think it could be used by anyone, but you know, we have some very good examples with Exceed and Open Science Grid, especially with Campus Champions, and just being able to have conferences like this today and share ideas and information. I think a lot of us have come to the same conclusions, and I'm certain we've all duplicated the same thing time and time again. I'm certain that almost every one of us in the room have used the same applications. We've served the same customers. At some point, somebody's going to get the bright idea to write a universal manual for high performance computing and make lots of money selling it.
Thank you. Derek, do you have any, we started out with you talking about some students. Do you have any additional comments to add?
The only thing I would say is we typically employ probably 6 to 8 students in any given semester. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So we typically employ 6 to 8 students any given semester. Like Claire mentioned, we look for domain-specific knowledge for our largest researchers, basically, or our most popular packages, things like R that seem to be relatively universal, Python, those type of things that most use. And then typically what we do is try and catch them where we have at least a year, maybe, that we can work with. There are a few that we've caught a year out of them before they go on to business or teaching or whatever their future endeavors are. And then for the other ones that have stuck around and we've transitioned up through the ranks here, and they're now part of our client engagement team.
So Derek, I'll start with you on this question. As you grow from a single user shop to a multi-person support team, what gotchas do you have with, or I guess, when does it become more difficult to manage multiple people than it does have one person working on it?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing we see here when you're kind of growing that organization out that makes it harder to manage, obviously with multiple people, is the development of the soft skills. A lot of the folks that we bring in don't have a good grasp on the soft skills sometimes. And that's a tough thing to teach as well, right? I mean, I can teach somebody how to do something technical. I can write a manual for it, step-by-step process, but that development for their soft skills of how to talk to people and how to calm down an angry client, those type of things take a little more time to do. And so typically, you know, we try to stay engaged at a management level long enough and we don't always do a good job of it, obviously, management level long enough that people can develop those soft skills, or we can work with them, go to the meetings with them, and those type of things. But on the flip side of that, there's only so much of our time to go around. So it really does help us, honestly, to do those joint hires, because they already have relationships within that community usually. And then that makes it an easier transition for them as well as for us.
Very good. Jerry, how about you? How about yourself? When did it become more difficult to manage people versus needing, or, when did the benefits of managing or having more people outweigh the need to manage people?
Well, that's where the standard operating procedures come in. As long as people understand what their jobs are and they report on it effectively and often, then managing pretty much takes care of itself. The key is making sure that we all share information with each other, so that we don't do any duplication, or we don't create any problems, especially if someone has one idea about one thing and then someone has another, and then they both tell a customer different things. That can cause problems. And so within an organization, communication is key. And that's where being a manager comes in. And so we have for that if there are projects that need to be done, whether it's with a customer or internal, that everybody's on the same page. And as long as that's there and everybody is meeting their obligations, then really it's not that much of an issue.
Claire, what's your perspective?
So in order to grow my team, I've had to be a little bit creative. And so I have something similar to Derek's situation, where we've got, we haven't joint hired and done a half-half with a department or a division. But what we do is allow our folks to be, pieces of them to be purchased off. And so I have a systems integration engineer who, for about 40% of his time, he works for the Qualcomm Institute here on our campus with Larry Smar. You might know him from the PRP project. But because he is offset like that, everything doesn't funnel through our division, our group. And so kind of that kind of sharing of a body creates a little bit of a trickier situation, so to speak, right? Because he's co-located there. And that's another thing. In order to grow my group again, I really like that idea of co-location. So I've worked very hard with the division of physical sciences, which is math, physics, and chemistry, biochemistry. And we are actually working together to create a position within that division that, at least for the first couple of years, they will pay 100%, but it will be a member of my team for those disciplines. And so that does create kind of an issue going forward as far as management, because obviously they're riding that fine line of they're actually kind of working for those folks within research IT services.
Very good. Robert, what issues did you have with growth?
I think for us, someone mentioned that, well, Dirk mentioned that they have a lot of different shops. Our research technologies sort of formed that way as well. There's the advanced visualization lab, there's high performance file systems, there's high performance systems, science gateways, there's a digital humanities group. So there's a lot of different groups that are providing services and support in all the different areas, but then they overlap, right? So storage will overlap with high performance computing, high performance systems, digital humanities. They're working with all of the different areas depending on what the researcher needs. And I think that somebody mentioned soft skills, And so having all of these different people who are really incredibly adept at what they do technologically, but may not be the best at the user-facing side. And so I come in, I'm not a technology person at all. As opposed to being incredibly technical right from the start. And that people are doing exactly one of the things we learned that has been taught last year and this year at this conference in Dirk's session about just not being demeaning to the researchers and making sure that you're not making a lot of assumptions about what they may or may not know. So being able to communicate that to all the people when you're talking about 100 different people who might be working with researchers, that I think is the most challenging part.
Good communication. No, I mean, of course, that's my thing. But when I've been involved with a lot of organizations that have been growing from small groups to large groups and have grown really fast. And hands down, the number one thing that challenges rapid growth is communication. You start with a small group, like one sys administrator who does everything, and then we went to like 6 sys administrators, and now this expert, this person who did everything, now has to divvy out his work, and it gets really hard. And communication is key. And that's my soapbox, so I'll just not get on.
Well, that brings me to my next question. Then, how hard was it for everyone to give up the technical side of doing the position and transition into the management role? And where did you pick up your management skills?
How hard? I never wanted to be admin on any of our systems. I refused to be admin if I could avoid it at any. They kept making me have the admin password, and I just only a select few should have that information. So I don't like to be in my hands, arms deep into building the systems. I don't mind helping debugging, but I'd much rather be user-facing in general. So it wasn't hard for me to let go at all.
I was the first person hired into this position, manager of education outreach and training. So I'm very different than the other panelists, and Henry reached out to me asking for someone who was kind of more in the trenches, who wasn't at the management level. So I'm bringing that perspective to the panel, but also the perspective that even my position was open for the first time in 2013, and I was the first person hired into it. So even just building from the ground up that position of bringing everybody together, going out on campus and doing events, doing fairs, meeting with researchers, bringing our workshops maybe up a level from what they were before, really doing anything that needed to be done to make sure that our users were seeing us as a very supportive resource for them.
So Claire, where did you pick up your management skills from, and how is that conflicted with any of the technical side of your job?
So years ago, I was an IT manager. So I was a system administrator, grew into an IT manager. So really management skills and that kind of background comes from that area. But then I moved over and started to do a lot of technical project management. And that's when I got kind of picked up into the temporary project that has now formalized into research IT services. And as I mentioned before, because we don't provide actual services, it's very easy for me now when my systems integration engineers pull up systems and are working on stuff. I don't have root to give up. They don't give it to me to begin with. And I just, maybe I'm a user or a super user. So I avoid that whole having to let go of the reins.
Jerry?
I have a confession to make. I have not released any reins, mainly because I've been steeped in both the management and the technological side. I've been building clusters since the Beowulf years. So, and I've always had my hands deep in it. For a time though, when I became a research scientist, I stepped away from the cluster and did more outward facing customer support with the PIs and the professors across campus. And so when I came back to UTD, I had to pretty much revisit everything that I knew and take on that role again as technology leader and you know, information expert. So how did I get management skills? Well, I went back to school, got the MBA, so I have a complete understanding of management theory. Before I was an academic, I was a process engineer for Texas Instruments, and so corporate individuals and other departments and project management. And so when I came into academia, I was wondering what everybody was doing because I didn't see any productivity. And so it took me a while to understand how the pace of academia was a lot slower than it was in the corporate area. So it took me a while to adjust to that. And then I sharpened my own technical skills by constantly learning more about information technology. And I said, what the heck, let's go get the information systems PhD so I can round everything off. So what you're looking at is the complete package of both the management and the technology side of IT.
So with the MBA, then do you think people in this field, once they get towards management, people tend to give up root access and day-to-day technical operations. Why have you decided to keep hold on both of those reins?
That's a very good question. Mainly because one of my roles is to create new IT professionals, and so I teach it at the college level. And so by doing so, I stay fresh within the field. So sometimes you never leave. It's almost like the Hotel California, right? You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave. And it's true. I'm not going to be the kind of individual who just rides off into the management sunset. I think I'm here for the long haul. And so not only am I going to teach high performance computing, but I'm going to make sure that I help develop the next generation.
Derek, what sort of training have you had for in the management area? How hard was it for you to give up the technical side?
That was very easy for me because I was hired in on the management side. I've never had root access to any of the systems. Basically, I've spent, I like to say, on-the-job training, right? The most effective kind, although not the easiest sometimes. Basically, I was hired in from my previous position, and I spent the previous 15 years in technical to dealing with clients. I was used to dealing with the technical side and not really knowing the nuts and bolts of everything, but being able to roll it up a layer to a higher level. It has helped as well, though, because when we were first developing our training materials and those kind of things, I would tell people, develop them so even an idiot like me can use them, right? And then I would go through the training materials to see, hey, can I do some of these things that they're saying? As a basic user, an entry-level user, which was really helpful for me because I learned a lot as I was doing it. But you know what? I've never had my hands on the keyboard. I try to look for and hire people that I trust that can do those type of things because, frankly, it's not my strength and it's not where I like to spend my time. I like to know enough about it to be dangerous, basically, is what I say. And that's about where I'm at. I know enough at a high enough level to be dangerous, and that's about the extent of it. So I was hired mainly for the management side. I haven't had to give up the technical side. Although I will say this too, there are some frustrating parts about that as well, because from the flip side of that, it's really easy for me to not understand exactly what it takes to get some things done, or to have probably would be necessary. if it were something I had done before.
So when you hire, do you have a comment? When you look to hire staff, either facilitators or system admins, is there a particular type of temperament or personality traits you look for?
For me, for me, it's an outgoing personality. You know, a lot of times people research or on the technical side spend a lot of time behind the keyboard, and like I said, those soft skills, those interactive skills are sometimes lacking on that side. You know, I will say this though, I think that's gotten a lot better. You know, as we've grown over the last 4 years here, because we have a lot more interactions. We require a lot more interactions. We don't let people just reply to a ticket necessarily all the time behind a keyboard. There has to be a face there somehow. And, you know, we bring those people to our events and things like that, you know, our training sessions, our workshops, so that other people get to know who they're talking to when they ask a question.
Do you have a comment or
So,
not?
when I became director of the HPC, one thing that I helped transition was away from our cowboy mentality or fireman mentality of system administration. So in a smaller shop, you tend to have, you know, a small set of people who know everything goes together and everything's, you know, done by hand. And as we grew, we needed to put policies into place on the DevOps side. You know, start formalizing how systems are brought up instead of just doing it by hand every time. And those types of things needed to come down from management. We needed to say, yes, we will spend time and, you know, adopt tools such as Puppet, I can't think of the tools now, but these tools that make it a little bit more robust on the system. When you're small, you can handle some of those things, and you're using your hands dirty when things go wrong. But as you get bigger, you have to make it more formal. That takes time and effort, and it really takes a management decision to do that.
So, Robert? Good. All right. Well, let's move on to as far as roadblocks to retention. What sort of in order to keep your people, what pops up that keeps people from staying?
We've lost a couple of really good people within the last 2 years. And ironically, they didn't go into industry, they went to other universities. And they still keep in touch with us, and we still work with them and collaborate with them, which I think is great. So I think that maybe just specifically at Indiana University, a lot of folks come from the university system, you know, come to do their undergraduate or graduate, get hired into the high performance computing area. They stay on, and then eventually when they have families or things like that, they are looking to go somewhere else because they've been there a long time. So the people who we've lost recently, well, all pretty good friends of mine. I don't know exactly how to fix that. I mean, I guess that would be a really big roadblock, because if they're just looking for a different environment and they don't necessarily dislike the environment they're in, then I'm not sure you can fix that, or there's anything you can do about that. The people who stick around, who we retain, they stick around because we do build a good community within our division of personally helping each other out, whether that's, you know, moving when they're moving locations or across town, or simply checking in with them if they've had a couple days off that weren't expected. I think those things can go a long way to retaining the people if they know that you care about them and you're creating this environment of not being so into their personal space that you feel like they're putting up walls, but being personal enough that they know that you care about them and that you want, you know, sort of a work-life balance type thing. Good people, and we're able to retain them for the most part. But we have lost 3 managers recently in the last 2 years who were really great performers who did just go on to a different academic environment.
I don't know if my strategy worked, but I had a strategy. Mine was reverse psychology. I tried to tell all my employees, give them lots of opportunities to get promoted and be successful, but also tell them that they needed to do their jobs as if they're leaving their jobs. And so I encouraged them to document what they did thoroughly, and I would write them excellent reviews if they were good, but all my people were good. And encourage them and help them find jobs outside of where I was, kind of being more of a mentor than a boss, but also giving them plenty of opportunities at the university. We couldn't pay them as much, but we can give them a lot of flexibility and a lot of community that they can enjoy, and absolutely let them stay, but also let them know that it's okay if they go. And that was my strategy, is just what would be best for them, thinking that making a good environment and letting them choose would keep them. That was my strategy. It didn't always work, though I didn't have much turnover until after I left, which I brag about.
Quick couple of comments from Zoom chat. Computing centers for connecting with researchers and increasing usage of and access to experts and services. As you're growing the team, have any of you experimented with partnering with your university libraries? And if so, what is successful or challenging about that partnership?
So I see Jerry wrote out a response in the chat. Oh, Claire, do you want to go first?
Sure. So, can you mute? Sorry. So at San Diego, we work very closely with our university library, and we in fact do co-consultations regularly. It's worked out very well because program, and and the thing that's challenging about it is that probably that we don't have even more time together. We meet once a week. Our facilitation team meets with their equivalent, and we also have an extended meeting monthly that extends out to other partnership consultation groups.
Jerry, you had some comments you wrote in the chat. You want to expand on those?
Okay, yes, I would. So at Texas Tech, I led a research data management project, and it was a project that was not only responsibly, but physically shared across 3 entities on campus between Central IT, the VPR's office, and the library. And the challenge to that was getting everybody onto the same level as far as technology goes. All the managers were pretty much on the same level. They didn't understand how it worked. And so the challenge was to, one, get the technical people in the library and the VPR's office up to the level that they needed to use the system and administer it. And then we had to develop instructions where the managers could understand how to use it. And we kind of laughed amongst ourselves that once we knew that the managers knew how to use it, then anybody could use it. So, and the whole point of the system was to take research data, and of course that's a very nebulous word, research data. What is it? And so we had to create some guidelines guidelines, and of course, the website that allows you to develop research data management plans. So what the data management plans specify is what kind of data you have, how big is it, and what type of it, is it top secret, is it public, is it, all that good stuff. And so what I'm describing is metadata. And so this metadata had to be organized, and so we had to teach the librarians how to manage the metadata catalogs in this new system. And so there was a lot of startup time. It took 3 years to develop and deploy. So a research data management system isn't something that just falls out of the sky. It requires a lot of teamwork, a lot of patience, and also some money. And so the central IT, VPR's office, and the library invested in a system. And last time I checked, the system's doing well. So it's one of the last legacies I left Texas Tech before I left.
Does anybody else work with the library?
Yeah, we worked with the library on a limited basis. I mean, typically it's for storage of larger data sets, national data sets, things like that. We do meet with them regularly to see if there's synergies, but up to this point, the expertise and the majority of the services outside of those storage services come through us at this point, come through the Institute.
I didn't have any question. Oh, yeah.
So I have a couple of good examples of working with the library. At Indiana University, we developed the Heidi Trust Research Center, and so that was a big collaboration between our digital library program and the Research Center, which is the Data to Insight Center, which is also part of the Basic Technology Institute. I actually came from but also from the technology side to make sure that the systems were in place to house everything, that they were securely taking care of all the copyrighted material. And then as the High Trust Research Center spun up, they were developing tools so that researchers could work more with the in-copyright manuals that had been digitized, but in a secure way, so they couldn't download like an entire volume, because that would be infringing on copyright. So that took a lot of work between both the technology side and the library side. Within our group, Research Technologies, we actually have a group called Cyber DH, which is Cyber Digital Humanities, and they work all the time with people in humanities, and so they work also closely with the library. One of the kid approach to mom and dad, if you don't get the candy from one, you're going to try to get the candy from the other. So we have a good working relationship with the libraries, but I do think there are some challenges there just because we're such a huge university system, and we do have smart people building systems and doing things on both sides.
So just comments on there about politics. Does anybody have the politics of being a center director or the position that you currently have? Dirk, do you want to go first?
Politics, you can't avoid them. It doesn't matter where you are. I tried very much to be the solution, not the problem. That's hard to do too, because I have limits on my build relationships with all the people that I have to make sure that they see you face to face, that they know what you're trying to get done. Then they can buy into what you're doing. If they don't ever see you except when you want something, it's not as easy. A relationship building. Henry?
Oh, sorry, just lots of stuff from out in Zoom land. We're trying to establish a better working relationship with our campus. Okay, so that's somebody commenting. politics, I think you guys were talking about that. Gary put in convince management that they own the project, create tangible goals, report progress regularly, the politics should subside. I do have one comment of my own about that. So it's very easy, I think, to look at politics as a bad thing. And I kind of like to turn that upside down and look at politics as a good thing, because you got to set the right baseline for what you're comparing politics to. The problem with politics is the alternative to politics is not rainbows. The alternative to politics is murder. And we rarely think about it that way, but politics is the system of strategies we've developed to settle our differences without resorting to bloodshed. War is the alternative to politics. And so if you look at it from that perspective, yes, it's still a pain. But on the other hand, it's so much better than the actual alternative. There has never been a human system involving more than one human being that didn't involve politics. And all of us who go home at night to fellow human beings know perfectly well we don't just
If I can add one quick, if I can add one quick thing, I agree with what Henry said. One of the things that we've tried to do is get faculty governance and faculty buy-in. So we have a lot of committees that include faculty members, so they feel like they have a voice, and they do have a voice, by the way. And we do take that input seriously, and you know, we let that help us drive our strategies and roadmaps. Now, I will say too, you know, some people can be self-serving when they get in those committees and things, so that you have to be careful of. But from the perspective of the faculty feeling engaged and feeling like they have a voice and being willing to own part of the process, that goes a long way for allowing them to do that. And that helps remove some of those politics, because if everybody has a voice, then typically there are less people complaining about how no one cares about their perspective.
I agree with, who said that? I can't tell.
That was Gary.
Thank you, Derek. I agree with that. I actually have a story I wanted to share. We were trying to implement a bioinformatics curricula across campus because we had so many different departments doing bioinformatics that they decided, well, everybody agreed we needed a common bioinformatics curricula. And so they hired a bioinformatics specialist who was excellent. He worked with one of our managers, and they came up with this really, really well thought out proposal. And they had all this plan, and they had a dollar amount that they wanted to do, and then they presented it to the community, and the community went crazy. They hated it. Everybody said, I wasn't asked, I wasn't asked, I wasn't asked. And so even though I think it was an excellent proposal, it never left the ground. And then what happened, a few years later, they said, we still need this. And so they got another team together. And this time, the person in charge of the second team made a committee of all interested parties. And every draft went through that committee and said, do you agree with this? Tell me now, or I'm not going to move, or we're going to move forward. And by then, when we proposed it to actually get it funded, so many people had seen it. Everybody had at least agreed to buy in by not reading it. They said they bought in, and no one could veto it so late in the process because everybody knew what was going on. Those are the types of politics that need to happen to make these big ideas move forward.
But you would say the exact same thing got pushed through the second time.
Actually, the similarities between the proposals were not important. They're extremely similar. There were a few noticeable differences, I think mostly because they didn't want to be the same proposal.
Unfortunately, in a previous endeavor, my experience was to watch a curriculum start to be developed in the same manner that you described for the first time, with the same pushback, and a very similar second attempt. But we had the same pushback as the first time. Oh, I didn't read that, so I'm not going to approve it now. Well, you had the opportunity. I don't care. So that either way can work, and part of that's political climate as well. You can't always control the climate as much as you might want.
And I must say that the person on the second proposal was excellent at politics. If he did not hear back from someone important that could have, he would walk down and knock on doors. Because he made sure we had buy-in before it actually went forward. And I agree with that. It can be really hard. But I learned a lot from that particular person.
So it wasn't just a case of, okay, we didn't hear back from them, so we're going to assume that they approved it. It was, okay, I didn't hear back from them. I'm at least going to go talk to them about it.
Yeah, we knew who the squeaky wheels would be based on the first proposal, so we made sure those wheels were greased for the second proposal.
Any other questions in the audience? Claire, do you have any politics?
I think it's a fine kind of a needle that you have to kind of weave through, and I think that Dirk's comments are interesting about the resubmittal. I think that timing is really essential. Sometimes you will hit that brick wall, and then other times it'll sail through, and you just have to, either you have to get kind of kind of clairvoyant about figuring out when to submit, or you just have to be a little bit strategic and just throw it over the fence or jump off the cliff and just cross your fingers and pray.
Jerry, any comments? See, he's typing something in there.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry about that.
I'm sorry about that.
Can you mute? Okay, thanks.
So
Make sure that all stakeholders are defined and try to work with your competitors until they eventually become your collaborators. And then eventually your collaborators then become your friends. It's almost like a continuum. And sometimes that just comes from just either a lack of understanding of what people do or a lack of understanding of what organizations are trying to do. But at the end of the day, you serve the students, and we serve research, we serve the faculty, and we have to center at the university. So that's sometimes a challenge, and we have to make sure that our actions match our words. Sometimes we can offend collaborating departments just by thinking. We need to really make sure that our stakeholders are included in a lot of cross-campus projects and these big decisions, I put in quotations. We have to make sure that all the interested parties are involved, or even the non-interested parties. We need to make sure that a lot of your big players on campus, especially VP, the deans, if you're doing a academic project, we need to make sure that we include everybody and try our best, especially if somebody comes out of the woodwork and says, I'm angry because you didn't include me. Immediately apologize and bring them to the table. It's important that we don't have the squeaky wheel, because all it takes is one squeaky wheel to have a project go upside down. And so as long as everybody's included, I think a lot of these projects, in my experience, in the 16 plus years I've had in high performance computing and project management, I've seen projects go from disaster to success just by including the right people and making sure that they're engaged in the process.
I think that's wrap it up here. It's 10:15. I want to thank everybody on the panel for participating this morning.